How are you? Welcome to Positively Spiritual. My name is Shannongilmour, and we're gonna get into some deep questions today. Questions to unlock your healing, understanding ADHD, and there is something controversial behind ADHD, as psychologists are telling us one thing, but we're discovering something else. And so it's a matter of psychology says this, we're determining that. And, it's causing division, it's causing us the inability to find answers that we're looking for. So let's figure this out. Hi Cynthia, how are you? It's nice to see you. Welcome. It's we're gonna dive into sorry, my hair's in my face. We're gonna dive into understanding ADHD today. This is a very sensitive topic, but it's something that needs to be shared. You've been staying up so late. You just woke up a few hours ago. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, let's hope you get some sleep tonight, girl. All right. So, let's get to the bottom of this, because there are hidden insights that I want to share with you that came about from my own questioning. So it's nice to see you, Joe. Hi, good to see everyone. Welcome. So my name is Shannongilmour, and it is nice to see all of you guys. I am your sister in arms. I am a peer support mentor. I've been doing peer support, trained in peer support. I've trained on how to communicate and how to listen. So I am here for you. Just mind the hair because it's in my face right now. So, but I am here to listen, and I'm here to help you. And that's what we do on this channel. I help provide answers, or, at least I want to give you those thought-provoking commentaries that help you question, to not question like, oh, that's bad, this is horrible, and oh my gosh, I can't. We're not here to question ourselves. We're here to ask questions, because questions are good. Asking questions helps you learn. So we're not here to ask questions to judge. We're not here to judge the players. We're not here to judge ourselves. We're here to judge the narrative, we're here to question the narrative, to see for ourselves what answers best resonate, because you know yourself best. So today we're unpacking something big. Is ADHD really just a brain disorder, or is it sometimes a symptom of deeper wounds? And what if bad parenting isn't what we've been taught it is? And bad parenting, I believe, has something to do with ADHD symptoms. We're going to get into that. We're going to challenge definitions. We're going to open up the conversation to include epigenetics, learned helplessness, and the impact of parents' emotional tone on their children's brain development. Whether you're a parent, a survivor, or someone who is living with the ADHD, you deserve this truth. Whether it's a truth for you or not, that's up to you to decide. But in this video, I want to share with you a topic about ADHD, also known as attention deficit hyperactive disorder, that is easily overlooked. Now, this is coming about from in researching ADHD from my own personal, just because I was curious. And for this channel, obviously, I stumbled across a term called negative bias. And here's what I found out about negative bias. negative memory bias to be exact. So negative memory bias is the tendency to focus more on negative experiences or information than positive or neutral ones. Sounds correct, as we are traumatized. It's natural when you're traumatized, you focus on the negative, you don't focus on the positive. So this cognitive distortion can make negative events seem more significant, more frequent, and more relevant than they actually are. I didn't know that. Which in turn can influence our mood, our behavior, and our self-perception. Interesting. Now, negative memory bias has a role in ADHD. Remember this, that negative memory bias can influence our mood, our behavior, and our self-perception. So write that down. In individuals with ADHD, attention deficit, hyperactivity disorder, negative memory bias can play a significant and often underestimated role in shaping their emotional and cognitive experience. Here's how. Reinforcement of low self-esteem. People with ADHD often face repeated criticism, social rejection, academic failure, or underachievement. I guess I have ADHD too, and it's not diagnosed. But I personally don't live by labels. I'm just me. And I recognize there's problems and I'm working on them. So with that said, negative memory bias causes us to retain and recall these moments more vividly while overlooking times of success or praise. This reinforces a sense of, I always mess up, I can't do anything right, no one believes in me. And over time, this becomes part of their internal narrative, fueling shame, self-doubt, and depression. So I do believe that narcissists, not saying a person who suffers from ADHD is a narcissist, but I do believe that narcissists do feel, or they do have this negative memory bias, which they force us to focus on. I mean, trauma does that. Number two, there's in ADHD and with this negative memory bias, there is the emotional dysregulation. ADHD is not just about focus, it's about emotional regulation. A negative memory bias can intensify emotional reactions to current setbacks, trigger past failures that feel just as fresh as the present. This leads to rumination over what went wrong. This can result in emotional paralysis, avoidance behaviors, and impulsive reactions. Number three, impaired working memory and filtering. ADHD affects working memory, the brain's ability to hold and manipulate information when working memory is weak. Positive memories may fade faster. For me, that's true. Negative memories, which are emotionally charged, are more salient and easily retrieved. And this skews perception of reality towards failure or rejection, even when it's not the whole truth. Absolutely. Number four, hindrance to motivation and goal setting. If a person recalls more failure than success, they're less likely to take healthy risks. Try again after setbacks. Set ambitious goals, but no follow through or little follow through. This internal resistance isn't laziness, it's learned helplessness. And we talked about learned helplessness in another video on this video channel. And this is built on a distorted memory pattern. Hey, Livolus, how you doing? Hi, Joe. Hi, Resistor. That's okay. That's noble. Okay, I'm reading somebody's comment. You guys are talking amongst yourself. I'm just going to continue with this. Okay, so number 5, interaction with rejection sensitivity. Many people with ADHD experience rejection sensitive dysphoria, or RSD, when negative memory bias is present. This is seen as rejections are replayed and exaggerated. The emotional sting of past hurt is never truly resolved. Future social interactions may be avoided out of fear of repeating the past. So, what helps? Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. This helps identify and challenge distorted thinking patterns. Mindfulness. We talk a lot about mindfulness on this channel. And mindfulness increases present moment awareness and reduces over identification with past experiences. Positive reinforcement journals, recording daily wins, even small ones, can help build a more balanced memory base. ADHD coaching offers structure and encouragement to counteract the inner critic. Negative memory bias in ADHD is like a mental filter that magnifies past pain and minimizes progress, contributing to emotional struggles and self-doubt. Addressing this bias is key to healing, building resilience, and unlocking the potential that ADHD minds truly hold. But this in itself got me curious because my brain has a natural negative memory bias based on my own personal upbringing. I mean, my parents were negative towards me, abandonment issues all around, all that jazz. Well, this caused me to ask deeper questions. As I asked, okay, I wanted to know exactly about how is negative memory bias formed in trauma then? If ADHD isn't formed by trauma, as psychologists say, no, it's genetic. It's not from trauma at all. It can be, but it's not. I'm just like, I beg to differ. I'm going to ask some more questions. So just bear with me because I'm going somewhere with these questions because I personally don't like labels. Because labels keep us too reliant on people who are educated, but they don't know you like you know yourself. Labels kind of tend to say, oh, you can't change. You're diagnosed with this, so live with it. That's your life sentence. No, just because you've been diagnosed with something doesn't mean it's your life sentence. You can change if you want to. So it's like saying, oh, I'm sick. Well, you may feel sick. Sickness may have a hold on you at this point, but is sickness a life sentence? No. Sickness, the cold does eventually go away. You stubbed your toe. You don't go around and say, I am my stubbed toe. You say, I stubbed my toe and I'm feeling the pain of stubbing my toe. So this is, how we talk to ourselves is important as well. And that's another video for another time. But I wanted to probe further because this I found very curious. I was feeling like I was seeing a mix-up. I was seeing discontinuity in the answers according to psychology, because from my research on narcissism and healing from narcissism and negativity and just being negative myself, trapped in my trauma, hurting people that I really deeply cared about, and not recognizing that I was structured in trauma, I can't get on board totally with what psychology is saying. Now, I can be wrong. I'm not an expert. I'm just an experiencer like you guys, but questions do help us figure things out. So I asked, can ADHD be formed in children whose environment is negative? I mean, ADHD is centered around negative structuring, is it not? Now, it seems like scientists want to streamline this disorder as having to do with neurology in the brain, and that is because of the brain, and like ADHD develops from the brain's perspective, from neurology. So that's good. And I'm not a brain surgeon, but it seems to me that our emotions and behaviors are regulated in the brain. So my questioning was, okay, trauma causes our brain to de-evolve, if you will, to become traumatized, like literally physically traumatized, and we become mentally ill. I mean, we become mentally dysfunctional because of the negative trauma. So specific neurons determine what chemicals are released during specific situations that we endure, right? Because it's these chemicals that respond to our outside stimuli. So ADHD makes sense that it is behavioral. But that's the question that I was trying to find out in my research. Is ADHD is it a behavioral disorder? Psychologist says no. But that led me to another question. Isn't the brain development dependent on an individual's environment? Okay, just think about this. Our brain does not stop developing once we are born. Our brain develops to a certain point in the womb, and then after we are born, the brain continues to develop. And how it continues to develop is with specific stimuli that invokes emotions and evokes the stem cells and the neurons and, growth. So because the brain is underdeveloped when we are born, it continues to grow and develop as we physically mature. So for me and my questioning, is it safe to say that every individual has a predisposition to develop ADHD because of either positive or, well, it would be negative stimuli within their environment? Now, psychologists do not believe that ADHD is determined by environmental factors, but yet the brain needs environmental factors to further develop as the child grows. So there's a discontinuity there. You see where I'm getting a little bit confused here? So then I wrote down, okay, well, from my own research, what would the role epigenetics play in ADHD then? See, this is where I'm showing you guys why this is partly why this channel exists, is because in my research, there's different branches of science, and science, these branches stand by themselves. And I'm telling you, if they all got together and collaborated, we would have science mastered. But because these branches stand on their own, we've got biological sciences, behavioral sciences, we've got, quantum science. If all of these scientists got together and really studied the human body and our energetic patterns as a whole, as a collaborative group, we would have the human individual mastered pretty much. But all these groups have to work on, they just, no, I'm the boss. Nope, I'm right. No, you're wrong. I'm right. It's like having, different church denominations. Every denomination has some sort of truth in it. And that's like the scientific communities. They have some sort of truth in them, but every denomination within these scientific communities suggests that they're right and everybody else is wrong, or it doesn't apply. So in my study with narcissism, I've done a little bit of studying about the brain, and about the neurology, like I've mentioned, feral children. So in understanding the brain of a feral child and how it is stunted, and it's beyond repair. So I took that questioning of what I understand about that part of the brain. There is, to me, something going on here that we're not seeing. So what exactly are the environmental factors? You know, the environmental factors that I'm talking about as the brain develops in the childhood home. What are these environmental factors? Well, these environmental factors are the stimulating environments that a child grows up in or is influenced by. That's simply what that means. So in this video, I want to redefine, if you will, for a lack of better term, I want to redefine what bad parenting is according to psychology, and what other factors, environmental factors, need to be included in what we determine as being bad parenting. So, hi Mark Travis, how you doing? So the narrative on psychology and certain diagnoses we challenge that. I do believe they need to change, because the lack of understanding psychology is causing a lack of understanding in our diagnosis, and we're hanging on to that diagnosis and we're believing, nope, we can't change. I've been born with ADHD, so I just can't change. Or no, I've got trauma issues, and my amygdala is underdeveloped now, so I can't change. No. With God, everything is possible. If you're determined to change, you will change. It's up to you. It's not up to a diagnosis. If God can heal the lame, the blind, if he can make the lame walk, if he can, there was somebody who had something wrong with their arm, and Jesus said, extend your arm, and his arm was back to normal. God can do anything. If you are determined enough and you want God's help, you can do that. But in order for God to be God in our lives and heal us, we have to stop making psychology and stop making clinicians our God. They're just people too. They're human too, and they are built with human error. So they should not be put on a pedestal. Their advice should be taken. Yes, I'm not saying dismiss their advice, but that's all it is. It's advice. Some of it is their opinion. Some of it is what they've researched. Some of it is what they see in others. That's great. That's wonderful. But you have the internet at your feet. You can go look into those research journals. You can go and do your own research. You don't have to rely on the diagnosis of a doctor. I mean, how many times have you heard that doctors have given the wrong diagnosis? Doctors have given the wrong surgery. So doctors are people, and they make mistakes. So I want to address these questions and take away some of the confusion that surrounds ADHD, because it is linked to trauma, and it is my opinion, just my opinion. You guys can disagree with me. It's my opinion that not all trauma is equal, but in its inequality, it is just as severe on the brain as the brain responds only to positive or negative environments. And that positive or negative dominant environment is what develops the brain accordingly to meet the needs of that dominant environment. So if you have a negative environment, if you are around negative people, negative energy, your brain is going to develop towards that negativity. But if you have a positive environment where you've got positive people, positive environments, you're, engaging and you're happy, your brain is going to develop towards happy. So I think if psychologists and scientists actually took a brain that, was formed, developed in the ideal situation where it could have the best of its food sources, its, like if they were doing, experiments on mice, perish the thought, I don't like experiments on animals, but that's what they often do. And if they put the mice in an ideal environment where the mice were in their natural habitat and everything, clean water, clean food, healthy food, proper sunlight, there was enough pH balance in the soil, like their environments to thrive was perfect, was absolutely ideal. And then they took a look at the brain scans. And then compared to the mice that were living in negative conditions where they had to fight for clean water, like they had to go and search for clean water, they had to, their searching for food, foraging for food was harder to come by, and they weren't raised on the ideal food that their bodies would metabolize. They had to make substitutions. And for the mice, mice love grain and they love fruits and vegetables, but maybe they were only given less fruits and vegetables and not as much, and maybe they only had one source of food, whereas the mice in the ideal environment was subjected to all the foods. So you take a look at these brain scans of the different mice in these different habitats, the good habitat, the bad habitat, the positive habitat, the negative habitat. What will you find? And that's what I think we need to start looking for. It doesn't need to be complicated. Just break it down into two simple structures as how God created it, negative and positive. There's negative energy, there's positive energy. That's it. And there's the neutral, but even God says, you're neither hot nor cold, so I will spit you out of my mouth. So neutrality is just like, just existing like a stem cell. A stem cell is just a cell that you can actually, scientists have determined that they can program and put information in that stem cell. It's a blank slate, and they can, put certain programmings in there to tell that cell to grow a heart, grow an ear, grow a nose, grow a lung, whatever. So that's stem cells are neutral cells that are impressionable. And so I'm thinking if scientists started, researching based on positive and negative energy, we'd be a lot further along. So this perspective I'm sharing with you is a spiritual one, and I invite you to stick around to the end of this video, because this video might help alleviate some of your personal confusion that you might have. So, is ADHD a disorder, a reaction, or is it both? So let's begin with a clear foundation. ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is classified as a neurodevelopmental disorder. It affects dopamine regulation, impulse control, focus, and emotional management. But here's the real question. Is ADHD always a disorder, or is it sometimes a reaction to the environment we are raised in? And yes, genetics does play a role. ADHD is highly inheritable, with up to about 70 to 80% of cases showing family links. But not everyone with those genes develops ADHD. Why? Well, that's because of epigenetics. Epigenetics steps in. Epigenetics simply Epigenetics simply means that your genes are the script. Your environment is the director. So you might have the potential to develop ADHD, but whether you do depends on early life stress, trauma, nutrition, and emotional modeling. The kind of same factors that I just shared with you about the mice. If science did some studies on mice to determine a positive environment versus a negative one. Imagine a child growing up in a home where a parent is emotionally shut down. Positivity is scarce. Depression is normalized. Conversations are fear-based, critical, or hopeless. This isn't bad parenting in the abusive sense, according to psychology, but it is. It's emotionally negative. If a narcissist does this to us as adults, where we don't get to share our positivity, where their depression is normalized as they project their depression onto us, and conversations are fear-based, critical, and hopeless with the narcissist, and we call that abuse, why can't we call this type of family upbringing abusive? See, this is where I think we have to change the bad parenting, because this type of parenting is emotionally shut down. This parent is positivity scarce. The depression is normalized. This is the same thing we go through in a narcissistic relationship. And even relationship experts tell us that when you're in a relationship where this is happening to you, this is abusive. This is emotional abuse. So psychologists don't consider this bad parenting in the abusive sense. It may be emotionally negative. It's not ideal, but it's okay. No, it's not okay. And it shouldn't be normalized, because I believe this type of environment shapes the brain. When you have an underdeveloped brain being subjected to an environment like this, what do you think? How do you think the brain is going to develop? Do you think it's going to develop normally outside of that environment? No. It's going to slant towards the negative environment it was raised in, it developed in. So here's some questions for reflection. What kind of emotional atmosphere were you raised in? Was joy the exception or the norm? Were you taught optimism or silently trained into helplessness? So let's just redefine what bad parenting is, what it really means, because traditionally psychologists point to extremes: physical abuse, neglect, verbal aggression. But what about the subtle, chronic harm done by emotionally unavailable parents? Parents living in unhealed trauma, parents who project helplessness, fear, or hopelessness. Isn't that exactly what the narcissist does to us? They're living in their trauma, unhealed trauma. They project their fear and hopelessness and helplessness onto us, and they're emotionally unavailable, and we call that abuse. But in parents, no, that's not abuse. Give me a break. Sorry, not sorry. Because children don't just mimic behavior, they mirror emotion. That's how they become emotional. The developing brain develops according to what it's developed, the environment it's developing in. So if a parent teaches the child helplessness, the child doesn't just observe it, they become it. A parent's inability to cope emotionally or spiritually becomes the child's internal reality. And also within the mind, the brain wires around that emotional reality, that internal reality. And over time, this creates behaviors that are ADHD-like. So let's talk about learned helplessness in ADHD. Because we've talked about this before, that narcissists teach us, or trauma teaches us, learned helplessness. This is a psychological state where a person, usually a child, stops trying to overcome challenges because nothing they seem to do makes a difference. Now compare that to the classical symptoms of ADHD: inattention, disorganization, restlessness, emotional dysregulation. They're eerily similar, aren't they? But what if they're not signs of a disordered brain, but a defensive brain, one trained to disengage, to disassociate, to stop trying? Because that's what a negative environment will teach the brain. That's how the brain was wired. And so you're wired, you come out of this family home wired like this, and you go and meet negative and positive people, and you like what positive people have to say, and you like how they create good things in your life. So you start hanging around positive people, and you discover, hey, I've got ADHD. Like, what's wrong with me? And psychology says, oh, it's a neurological disorder. Well, yeah, it is, but not the way that they think. So here's some questions for reflection. Were you ever made to feel like your voice didn't matter? Did trying harder ever result in more rejection or silence? This emotional shutdown doesn't just live in the heart, it alters the brain's circuitry, especially in childhood when the brain is still forming. So just think about this for a second, because I want to take us back to the Bible, because my questioning here was coming from a biblical spiritual perspective. Because when we read, about peace in King David's time, what does peace mean to you? Peace means that, okay, the kingdoms outside of Jerusalem were not warring with Jerusalem. King David made alliances or made peace, showed his bravado, showed his might, and the kingdoms were scared of him and his almighty God. Got it. Makes sense, right? But there was peace inside the walls of Jerusalem. And how was that peace gained? By everybody loving their neighbor as themselves, by everybody following the law of Moses, by everybody loving God with all their heart, with all their mind, with all their strength, by everybody, every parent and child, man and woman, respecting each other out of love, as they gave love, as they saw the divinity within each individual. It wasn't, go away from me, you street rat, you little imp, you're only 10 years old, how dare you talk to me like that? No, there was, a child was allowed to speak their mind, because a child spoke their mind in love and reverence to God. So everyone that they spoke to was spoken to the same. And that was the same with each man and woman. Didn't matter if it was an elderly person you were speaking to someone of your elderly, someone who was younger than you, or someone who was equal in age. It didn't matter if you were talking to the same sex, the opposite sex. Everybody spoke kindly, nicely to one another, as this precept was adhered. Talk about God when you walk along the road, when you sit down to eat, when you put your head on the pillow. You teach your children in the ways that they will go, and when they're older, they will never leave it. So, is this why ADHD sticks? Is this why narcissism sticks? Because our parents are not, and we as parents are not teaching our children in the way that they should go. We're teaching them how to be unloving towards themselves and to each other, because we as parents can't get our SHIT together and treat each other in reverence. It's always, oh, you're speaking badly to me. How dare you? Well, I'm sorry, but everybody has a right to have a bad day, in the way of they have a right to feel offended if you have offended them. And maybe that's why a child is speaking to you in that way, because they're offended and they feel like they're not heard. Instead of going, you're offending me, go to your room. Okay, I can understand you're upset, but I don't speak to you that way, so please don't speak to me that way. I'm giving you an opportunity to take a breath and refocus, and let's regroup and reword what you're saying and speak to me with a different tone, please. You're not above saying please and thank you to your children. You're not above saying please and thank you to your spouse. And this is what the people in David's day did. They said please and thank you. They mind their manners. They honored each other. But gone are the days of the family alliance. Gone are the days of, you know, the family integrity. So that's my question. That's where my question is. If we were standing on the sidelines of observing King David's kingdom under the love of God, would there be anybody who had ADHD or narcissism? No. The ADHD and the narcissism and all the cluster B personality disorders and all of that is outside of the walls of peace. So God created us with hearts that long for love, long for purpose and connection. And when those needs aren't met in childhood, something happens. Not just emotionally, but neurologically, the brain develops towards where the familiar patterns are. And the familiar patterns of this world, the governing pattern of this world is positive, negative. That's it. That's it. So you put a brain in a positive environment, it's going to develop positively. It's going to develop love. It's going to just express love. It's going to giggle and laugh, and the brain is going to have all this dopamine and oxytocin and less cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone. Their food is going to be clean. They're going to praise God, pray over their food, thank God for the food. They're not going to have preservatives that causes disruptions in your neurochemical and neurobiology in your brain and create mood disorders in your children. Did you know that GMO product does create behavioral disorders like mood disorders like ADHD? I'm sure if we change our diet and get rid of the processed foods and the chemically laden foods that have chemicals sprayed on it, I'm sure if people choose to grow their own foods or at least, sacrifice, going for spa days and instead spend that money on organic food, you would see different after a month of eating salads instead of, Hot Pockets and tater tots and processed foods and granola bars. Like, start cooking again. Start bringing the family together at, the dinner table. Start making the proper breakfasts. You don't need to eat meat every single meal of your day. Eating too much meat is not good for you, especially when it's filled with preservatives and cancer-causing chemicals to eradicate things, bacteria like listeria. It's all about being mindful. Do your research. Be mindfully in tune. This is your life. This is your life to lead. And we have so many people leading our lives through the government, through the educational system, through the pharmaceutical system, and now the food system, like, we should be allowed to eat what we want, when we want, how we want, and do what we want. Food should be free, water should be free, and our air is now taxed. It's like, wow. And that's another video altogether. But the thing of it is, when you think about King David's time, it was pure, clean, unadulterated. The bad guys were left out of the walls of Jerusalem. That's why there was a time of peace. But King Solomon, when his dad died, He went around the countryside and he had to make peace again with the kings, the kingships and the surrounding areas. And he didn't follow King David's ways because he didn't know these kings. He didn't know how his dad ran the kingdom. He didn't have a heart for following after David. Maybe at first he did, but he found an easier way. Make love, not war. And King Solomon didn't show the surrounding towns how great his God was. No, he made alliances with them and married the princess of, his first wife was the princess of Egypt. And he built her a palace. But because she didn't conform to the Hebrew way, her palace had to be outside of Israel. And then, you know what he did? He married and had how many concubines, and he sacrificed children in the high places where these Asherah poles were inside the walls of Jerusalem. This is signifying how sin gets in. And sin isn't just, we think of sin as being evil, but there are at least nine different Hebraic definitions for sin. And sin includes negative thoughts, negative feelings, negative actions. These negative things, they're not bad as the way we determine them to be bad. They create chaos. So when you're in an environment as a little tiny toddler, your brain is still developing, impressionable. It's like taking a little, baby chick that hasn't broken out of its egg yet and put an evil gargoyle mask on. Just put on a demonic mask. And when that chick comes out, that's what they see, you wearing the mask. That's what they're going to gravitate to. That's imprinting. Well, our mind, our brain imprints itself other people's behaviors imprint itself onto our brain. Other people's emotions project onto us, and our brain develops according to that stimulus. I think that makes sense to me. God created us with hearts that long for love, purpose, and connection. When those needs aren't met in childhood, something happens, not just emotionally, but neurologically. And the spiritual truth is we became what we're immersed in. So yeah, when God says the natural order of man is evil, yeah, can you see it now? Because the only nation that grew up in peace was King David's time, his kingdom. And no one has ever known peace like that ever again. Unless you want to talk about Tartaria, but that's not documented. That's another story for another time. So if you were raised around fear, you learned fear. If you were raised around negativity, you learned to expect the worst, but that was normal for you, so you never considered it bad. The brain does not determine what is good or bad, fantasy and reality. The brain does not have filters like that. It's your consciousness that does. So if your parent never believed in themselves, well, they taught you to never believe in yourself too. They taught you to doubt yourself. This is just the brain's environment that it grew up in. So you've got to retrain your brain. This doesn't mean we blame our parents because they were doing the best that they could from their own trauma. I get it, but they're still responsible as we're responsible. But what this means is that we validate the invisible wounds that lead to emotional dysregulation. And emotional dysregulation is the heartbeat of ADHD. So ADHD versus trauma symptoms. This is a blurred line. And here's where things get even more complicated, as if they weren't complicated enough. And I don't think we'd have to complicate this. I think I'm breaking this down to where we can understand. It's as simple as can be. Negative versus positive. And where heaven resides in the positive, hell resides in the negative, and we're born into hell basically. And we keep perpetuating hell in our lives by keep fueling the negative. And when we wake up and realize, hey, the negative isn't serving me, well, then we do something about it. And you can do something about it. I believe in you. I believe you can. You believe in God, then God is the one where all possibilities are created. So many trauma survivors are diagnosed with ADHD. But in some cases, what they're actually experiencing is hypervigilance, mistaken for hyperactivity. Even if it is hyperactivity, it's hypervigilance in some sort of manner. They suffer from disassociation, and this is mistaken for inattention. And emotional flooding is mistaken for impulsivity. So this is why so many people feel misdiagnosed or never find relief through medication alone. So here's some questions for reflection. Is your inattention or lack of focus, or is it a defense against feeling overwhelmed? Is your restlessness internal chaos, or is it a nervous system on high alert? Healing through understanding. This is a new lens approach, because what do we do with all of this information today? We stop asking, what is wrong with me? And start asking, what happened to me? What was modeled for me? What did my nervous system have to adapt to? Because it's about healing ADHD symptoms. Whether you want to believe that you want to believe the clinical diagnosis or it's trauma related, I think your healing begins with compassionate curiosity. Learn to ask questions and seek the answers to those questions. We learn to regulate what was never co-regulated for us. We built structure where chaos once reigned, and we invite God to reparent us, to speak our identity, to speak the truth and peace into our lives where negativity once ruled. See, ADHD is beyond genes. Imagine this. A child born with genetic traits linked to ADHD. But what if this child grows up in a home filled with love, emotional safety, and consistent attentive parenting? Could ADHD still fully express itself? I don't believe so. I don't think it could. Most science focuses on genetics or brain scans, but I believe this only tells part of the story. We delved deeper already into how ADHD is not a fixed destiny written in our DNA, but this is biology and environment. And it's more emotional than what we think. See, our brains don't come fully formed at birth. In fact, the brain is one of the most plastic organs of the body, meaning it's shaped and reshaped continuously by experiences, especially during childhood, because our brain is it's created by God to respond to negative and positivity. Our brains were structured by God to not just respond to negative and positive situations and people, but also be developed within a negative or positive environment. So negativity is our dominant go-to developmental phase of the brain, and we're trying to respond to people who didn't have that environment. See, going back to King David again, everybody had basically the same experience. So when you responded to one person, you're responding to all. It's like you're talking to somebody's not going to get offended just because you say something wrong, because you're not going to say something wrong. People were raised on the same value system. You know, if there was, just say there was, to make this easy to understand, say in David's day, they had a television and there was only one show that everybody could watch, Beaver Cleaver. Well, what do you think is going to happen? Everybody's going to model themselves or parrot or talk about Beaver Cleaver, and they're going to have the same kind of ideals. Well, that was what was going on with the Bible at that time. Everybody read the Law of Moses. That was their television station. And everybody was in tune and was given the same interpretation. The interpretation didn't deviate between this person who listened and that person who listened. They all got the same interpretation and lived it equally. So there was no offense. There was no sarcasm. There was no just, innocent or, malicious joking. There was none of that. There was, everybody loved and lived in that love equally. So everybody's brain developed the same according to positivity and love and light. So their brains only responded appropriately to good things. There was no need for people to go outside the walls of Jerusalem. So there was no need to get an outside source and, learn something new. It was all about spreading the love within the walls of Jerusalem and not leaving the walls of Jerusalem. The only time the king left Jerusalem was when he had to go do business and keep the other kingdoms in line. And he had to go and collect, usury. So understand this, that your brain developed according to its environment, and that's what ADHD is. ADHD is a response to living in an environment that you no longer want to live in, that you have determined cognitively that is negative. You just have no memory, conscious memory of being in a negative environment. And you're not going to go back in time and judge your parents and say, oh yeah, I've got this ADHD because of my parents. Well, you have no way of knowing that because you cannot consciously remember every single moment of your life living with your parents and how they dealt with their negativity and how you observed their negativity and absorbed it. But I guarantee that if you were living in the time of David, you wouldn't have ADHD. And so that tells me a little something about what's going on here. From the moment we leave the womb, our brains need stimulation, not just physical, but emotional. When a child is nurtured in a safe environment where parents are emotionally regulated, attentive, and loving, as in the kingdom of David, the brain's neural pathways develop differently than in an unstable or stressful environment. If we today stood against Jerusalem, who do you think we would be? we would probably be considered Sodom and Gomorrah. Our brains were hardwired to, well, not hardwired, excuse me. Our brains were actually hardwired to receive negativity and positivity. But you can't be negative and positive at the same time. There has to be an equal balance in order to have a nice happy medium going on here. But in our generations, we scored higher on the negativity. So our brains developed towards negativity. But then what makes it seem wrong, what makes our behavior seem wrong, is there's other people that we meet that didn't have the upbringing that we did. There were people who actually did have a somewhat better upbringing than we did, and so they didn't develop ADHD. So therefore, psychologists say, yeah, no, sorry, the person with ADHD, you're just, sorry, this is your luck, this bad luck of the draw. No, I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. I believe that just as every child has narcissism in them, we all have ADHD. We all live with ADHD in our childhood, but our parents or caregivers or some set of structures try their best to regulate it within us to help us develop our emotions. But, this gets exasperated with narcissistic individuals and trauma. When a child is nurtured in a safe environment where parents are emotionally regulated, attentive, and loving, the brain's neural pathways develop differently than in an unstable and stressful environment. Full stop. Now, ADHD has a strong genetic component, yes, but genes are potential, not guarantees. Think of genes like seeds. Some are more prone to grow certain traits, right? But whether those traits bloom depends on the soil, which is the environment. A child with ADHD genes raised in a healthy environment may never fully develop or may never develop at all this disorder, or may experience it less severely. This is because their brain's emotional and cognitive regulation systems get the support that they need early on. So the role of an emotional environment. Emotional regulation is the ability to manage and respond to feelings. This is fundamental for attention and learning as children. Why? Because attention is emotionally driven. That's a question that I had because, psychologists want to say this is a neurological disorder. And I'm just like, but attention is determined. Your attention is determined by your emotion. I mean, when you really think about that, it's like you pay attention to something that you care about. If you don't care about it, you're going to be like, I'm bored. That's why narcissists don't pay attention to you, because they don't care about you. And emotional regulation is the ability to manage and respond to feelings. This is a fundamental for attention and learning. And this is because attention is emotionally driven. We focus on what we care about or what feels safe. When a child's environment is chaotic, unpredictable, or emotionally neglectful, their brain remains in a heightened state of alert. This stress dysregulates the systems controlling focus, impulse control, and emotional balance. In other words, ADHD symptoms often arise because the brain struggles to regulate emotions in an unsafe environment. So learn to regulate your emotions. Learn to have some proper coping skills that help you keep yourself safe through self-awareness practices and self-soothing techniques, grounding techniques. So here's to rethinking ADHD. This leads us to some important questions here. Is ADHD simply a neurodevelopmental disorder fixed by genes? Or is it a dynamic condition shaped by how well a child's environment supports emotional and cognitive growth? Well, ADHD reflects biology, but I'm going to go on a limb to say that this biology is determined by cognitive growth because the brain develops until the age of 21. Your brain is always developing in your family home. Your brain is responding, collecting information and responding to information. So your brain is growing and your brain responds to what is familiar in your home. That's why we have narcissists in our lives, why we say yes, because, or why we say yes to their manipulations later on as we enable them, because that enabling and what they're doing to us, even though we cognitively know it's harmful, subconsciously it's familiar. The brain takes it in as, oh, this is familiar, keep giving me some more. This is what I know. This is what we grew up with in our early years. You, Shannon, just don't remember, but I, your brain, do. So what does this mean for healing? Well, if emotional environment shapes ADHD expression, then treatment must go beyond medication or behavior modification. Healing and support require building emotional safety for the child, for the adult. And it's like in children, we have to try to reshape the narrative. It's about helping families develop emotional regulation skills together, recognizing the role of attachment and relationship in brain development, creating environments that nurture focus through emotional connection, not just discipline. We've got to be better parents, basically. We've got to teach parents how to be better parents. So here's some questions to, reflect on. How has your emotional environment shaped your ability to focus or regulate your emotions? Can you identify moments where safety or stress influenced your attention? What small changes in your environment could support healthier brain development and emotional balance now? Understanding ADHD this way doesn't diminish the challenges that you are facing. It deepens our compassion and opens new doors for healing. I hope that this video has done that for you. I'm not here to, dismiss ADHD in any way. I just want to challenge the narrative because I want to give you an informed, I want to give you information so that you can make an informed decision. ADHD is not a life sentence. It's not etched in your DNA. It's a condition shaped by our brains and the hearts of those around us. So if you or someone you love struggle with ADHD, remember healing is possible when we nurture both the brain and the emotional soul. So if you want help, I can help you expand this, further into a positive thing by we can work together. If you want to talk this out, if you want to answer some of your questions that maybe you have that maybe you're too scared to ask, or maybe with your therapist, you've asked these questions and you felt dismissed. Well, in this video, I want you to be able to expand your mind further to see that healing is possible if you just give yourself the time to figure it out, because nothing is set in stone. Nothing. Humans are, we make mistakes. We're not gods. We don't know. Doctors, psychologists didn't create the human body. They just dissect it. So yeah, so I hope this video has helped you guys. Yeah, so let me just go back and catch your, oh my gosh, you guys. So yeah, all right. So I'm just going through your comments here really quickly. So hi Matt, nice to see you. Went no contact with my ex-wife. I miss her so much. She took my kids. She treated me like I was nothing. Now I am nothing to her. Oh, I'm sorry, Matt. How long ago did this happen? Okay. I hope this has helped you. Flexology? That's awesome. That's like with the feet. That's like, yeah, flexology is with the feet, right? Yeah. So, yeah. So I talked your ear off today, and I hope I've given you guys something to think about. And yeah, you may not agree with me, but this is just my take. I mean, it's what I think. I don't trust doctors. I really don't. I really don't. And God is my doctor, and but you know, you guys may have a different opinion than I do, and that's fine. I'm not judging anybody, so please don't think that. I just wanted to give you guys questions that I personally had, because I was just like, wait a minute. If ADHD is neurological, our our brains do respond to feelings as we have chemical releases and stuff. So what's really going on? Like, it just, you know, once you start asking those questions, write them down and you'll see for yourself. And you're welcome to share your questions with me, and we can figure this out together. So us women have hormonal issues to deal with. It's complex. Exactly. Yeah, it is complex. And you know, yeah, we do the best that we can. And you know, you are doing the best that you can. And only you know if you can do better. Because we've got to push ourselves out of, sometimes we've got to push ourselves, because being comfortable is also becoming stagnant. And when you're comfortable, you're not growing. And so we need to get uncomfortable to push ourselves beyond what we think are our limitations, because the sky's the limit to your knowledge. And you know, I've asked God to help me with my brain. I've asked him, you know, I feel this roadblock. I feel my brain cannot understand you, and I want to understand you. And I just like grabbed my head and I'm like, help me with my brain, God. And yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. And I'm so thankful. So thank you, Jesus. Thank you, everyone. And I encourage you to enjoy your day and take notes from this video. And you're welcome to scoop me off your questions at shannongilmour@protonmail.com. And we can talk about this. And yeah, just keep progressing on your healing. Don't let anybody tell you you're doing it wrong, because you're doing what you need to do for you. So with that said, I'll see you guys back here tonight at 10 o'clock. If you guys want to have further reading or information, please go to my Ko-Fi channel, as I have lots and lots of ebooks for you guys. There's something for everyone. Bible study, you know, healing, practicing impermanence, practicing radical acceptance, anger management, understanding how you are a thought in God's mind first. There's just so much on this channel that allows you to heal. There's something for everybody. So if you want to have a one-on-one FaceTime with me like we do on YouTube, I see your face, you see my face. We can privately chat on YouTube. Set up a time slot with me. There is a session button on my Ko-Fi website, and you can set up a time with me. And if you guys want to support this channel, please donate, as your donations help to keep me here twice a day, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 10 o'clock in the evening. And so that's our time. I look forward to seeing you guys tonight at 10. Enjoy your afternoon. See you later. Bye-bye.